Afghanistan seems to be in the limelight again. A couple of days back, there was a meeting held in Doha, Qatar. It was a closed door meeting sponsored by the United Nations, where delegates of different countries, including Pakistan, participated, and even the Secretary General of the United Nations also participated in that conference, although it did not come up with a very conclusive result. But in that, there was a discussion on the situation in Afghanistan and whether or how we should engage with the Taliban government. So now there is a lot of talk on that in the media in different countries, and it reminds me of another meeting that was held over the weekend in Islamabad, where some experts sponsored by two prominent think tanks, one based in Islamabad and one based in a friendly European country, they brought together some experts again to discuss the situation in Afghanistan and how to engage with the government. I was luckily invited to the reception dinner after the meeting, in which we had the opportunity to speak to the hosts and those participated in those deliberations and find out what was the agenda and how did it go. I was a little surprised when the host told me that one of the major agenda items was whether to engage with the Taliban government or not. And majority of the participants representing the Western governments and organizations over there were of the view that we should not, when I say we, it means West, should not engage with the Taliban government at all because they have the point of view the Taliban are not trustworthy and they don't listen to anybody, they just do what pleases them, and their human rights record is very bad. Till the time they show improvement in their human rights, in the socio-economic conditions, there, particularly with respect to the uh, women rights and women education, till then we should not engage with them. And when I was asked by the host about the opinion, I gave my opinion. um, Frankly, I think recognition, of course, yes, till the time they prove certain subscription to the international norms and values, it's fine. Every country has the right to decide whether to recognize or not. But I fail to understand that there are experts who call themselves experts who are so disconnected with ground realities in this day and age that they still think not engaging with a government in power is also an option. Sometimes I feel that the West is living in a fantasy world. They still have that fallacy that they are ruling the world. Of course, they did for a very long time. Uh, Initially, as the Western Europeans, they independently ruled uh, large areas of the world, different countries, and then under the banner of the United States of America, uh, after the Second World War, and particularly after the demise of Soviet Union, they had almost complete mastery of the world. So they could bomb countries at will, they could invade any country, or they could um, change regimes and install their compliant governments. And in this pursuit, if I can quote some examples, they went to Vietnam to protect the Vietnamese from communism. And they invaded Iraq to protect the rest of the world from the weapons of mass destruction which Iraq never possessed. And even in Afghanistan, they claimed to go into Afghanistan to provide education to their women and children and to improve their socioeconomic conditions. And then there are so many other countries like Panama or Haiti or Kosovo or Bosnia or uh, Libya. It's a long list, all in the name of Western style democracy, humanitarianism, or international liberalism. This liberalism, in my opinion, is also an hoax. The idea started with a genuine desire for peace and cooperation, but it was somewhere hijacked by the victors of the Second World War to impose their own will and agenda on the people around the world. The situation now is that the world has changed. The US led West's capacity to shape international geopolitical environment and to impose their own self-created narrative on the people has diminished considerably. And this needs to be understood and digested. The world has actually become a more dangerous place because of the destructive capability available to different countries. And I'm not talking of major countries, even smaller countries. I'll give you an example. For in the Second World War, there was only one country which possessed weapon of mass destruction. So its one-time use was enough to bring the opponent to the knees and end the war. But now, even smaller countries possess the capability that without using hard weapons, without going to formal wars, they have the soft means to create the destructions in men and material of the scales much higher than the atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Therefore, another world war is not sustainable. There will not be a victor in the next global war. What needs to be done? I think if we humans have to survive as a species, then we'll have to revert back to this original spirit of liberalism, the spirit which helped create United Nations, minus, of course, um, some things like the veto power, etc. We need to empower institutions like the United Nations or the non-aligned movement to give more voice to the third world and poor countries. As a student of peace, I can say with confidence that peace cannot be achieved with sanctions and coercion. We'll have to engage and cooperate. And in this regard, I'll quote a Westerner, Hoffman, who says, as a first step, it would mean a move away from the paternalistic, technocratic, one size fits all approach to peace building. A peace that is built on the ground needs to reflect the interests, needs, and aspirations of local populations rather than those of the international peace building community. And this is important. If we start by asking what we want to achieve, then we are starting with the wrong question. Unquote. This means we cannot impose our will on others. And as you just heard, even the Western experts agree from conflict resolution perspective that for a post-war rehabilitation, It is not important to have imposition of Western norms as a condition, but our primary objective should be to strengthen local capabilities. Once we have achieved a certain level of peace, engagement, and mutual trust, then of course we can go to the next step and ask those values to be respected which have international recognition. But if we put them as precondition for engagement, then it's definitely a recipe to failure. We have to give more weightage, emphasis to soft power rather than hard power. For example, in Russia, despite the ups and downs of the relationship with the West, certain institutions like the British Council, Goethe Institute, the Institute Francais have remained engaged. And this has actually helped create awareness and connectivity amongst the people and also provided platforms for engagement to government officials. Another very good example of this can be the Indus Waters Treaty between Pakistan and India, which has remained functional and effective even when the two countries were at war with each other. There is this Chinese saying which says that a single flower does not make spring, while 100 flowers in full blossom bring spring to the garden. We cannot, of course, underestimate the significance of uh, single steps. These initial efforts, which may be isolated sometimes, do matter. But ultimately, these single efforts will have to combine into a collective effort to bring forth desired objectives and results. We need to perhaps revisit Western international theories which promote the concepts of hegemony and zero sum game and leave the weak at the mercy of the strong. This is not how the future world should think and operate. We need to engage and cooperate. And of course, countries like Pakistan also need to revisit their foreign policy mindset. Instead of acting as proxy to one country or the other, we need to anchor ourselves in our own national interests and objectives and follow our own interests. We provided a bridge in the early 70s to literally connect two different worlds when we brought together China and the United States to forge a relationship. We can do that. We can do that again. But first, we'll have to put our own house in order.